homeostasis, if you remember that lecture. If those aren't working right, your thalamus and your hypothalamus, obviously hypo meaning just below, if those aren't working right, stuff's not getting through. The thalamus is actually considered one of the main gatekeepers to cortical function. So imagine if your thalamus is off, and that's a whole bunch of stuff too, then executive function is not important. Now, that's where, and the reason I like talking about the thalamus, hypothalamus, is because those take all of the sensations, whether it's inside and you feel full and you tell yourself to stop eating, or whether it's outside and it's temperature and I've got to cool off, I've got to hydrate, I'm thirsty inside, right? Because it's hot outside. All of those sensations come in, and then your executive function areas put all of that information together and you make a decision. Does that make sense? So it's really important that all of the previous lectures, you look at all of them. All those previous lectures are hugely important to lay the foundation down for executive function. That's why, for example, even with adults, if you come into the office, if I see you and we're talking brain function, any of you that know this, most of us should, one of the first things I look at is primitive reflexes. Yes, I'll look at eye tests and I'll do some higher level stuff. But the idea is I don't treat imbalanced eye function. Say you've got what we call a lazy eye. One eye drifts out, the other one stays dead center. That means that dead center eye is the one your brain is relying on. The other one is almost unimportant, right? I'm not going to focus on that. You may come in and say, oh, doctor, can you fix this? Can you do that? Can you do this? I'm going to look at your primitive reflexes first. Primitive reflexes, that is what helps a child and their brain develop and learn their environment. And a lot of the research says it's even active inside the womb. Okay. So we test for 10 different primitive reflexes or variations of, but I test for 10, following the Melillo method. There's a bunch of them, but I'll test for the 10. Imagine I've seen it in adults. Imagine as silly as this is going to look on an adult. The rooting reflex or the sucking reflex. You stroke a baby's cheek, and this is one of the first things you can actually, as a parent, if you have children or you plan on having children or you have newborns, right? If they aren't latching on, you can also check for this primitive reflex called the rooting reflex. And what I do is I'll stroke along the chin line, and then I'll stroke along the jaw, the jawbone here, and both times the chin or the jawbone area, the cheek, I'll stroke along that and I'll touch the lip, okay, with a little wooden stick, and I'll just stroke. An adult should never turn or even start to turn or have their jaw twitch that way. That reflex, and think about it, we didn't teach the babies how to breastfeed, did we? That reflex is there so that the babies can automatically turn to the stroke and start feeding so they don't starve to death and they start sucking in. And you didn't teach your child how to do that. We didn't teach our 4. I didn't teach my 4. No, my ex-wife didn't teach our 4 while I wasn't at home how to do that. The nurse, boop, right to the and breastfeeding right away. I'll never forget our 3rd child. My mother and I, mashallah, with the help of Allah, because I'm not that kind of doctor, the 3rd child got there before the midwife did. The sister was literally coming, and Allah knows best. Men and women plan, but Allah is the best of planners. So alhamdulillah, my mother was there, and she's a retired OR nurse. So we actually delivered our 3rd child at home. Our 3rd and 4th child were both delivered at home. And the 3rd child got there even before the midwife did. And everything. It's a hilarious story now. At the time, it was the most panic I've ever felt. And we let the midwife in. Well, we've delivered the baby, and now my mother runs to the door to let the midwife in. And I'm holding the baby and making sure she's okay. and breathing and everything. And the midwife comes in, and I hand my daughter to the sister, and she's already literally hardly even a minute, not even a minute. We talk about APGAR scores, color and temperature and everything. She rated her the highest scores across the board. It's just the blessings of Allah, because the grandmother and the father delivered her. And the sister took her, looked at her, checked the respiration, and did everything a midwife would do. And then she gave her to my wife. The baby's not even 5 minutes old yet. Not even, I mean, literally, it's probably less than 5 minutes, but I was in a panic. It seemed like days. But the idea is that she immediately, when my ex-wife put her to the breast, she started feeding now. Immediately now. So I know we didn't teach her how to do that, right? So these primitive reflexes, think about then with that story, think about an adult doing the same thing. And I've had adults on the table, and at that test, I'm usually, they're lying on their backs. I've done a couple other things, Palmer grasp, I've done Babinski, I'm going to do those. I'm going to do the Palmer grasp. I'm going to do the foot, the reflex with the toe. But I've already done this one. So they're lying on their back. And I can tell you, I've had grown men twitch and turn their head. And then they're really embarrassed when I tell them what reflex that is and why they can't control it. And then it's really interesting if I see a primitive reflex on one side, but not the other. So then we talk about primitive reflexes and brainstem involvement and cortical function, and all of that ties together. So what I really want you all to understand is we have to build from the foundation. Literally, that's why I love the Melillo method. Dr. Melillo has it from primitive reflexes up into the basic, up into and the hemisphericity that we've talked about for I don't know how many talks we've talked about hemisphericity and what kind of cognitive style you have, whether you're a right hemisphere or whether you're a left hemisphere person, because that's a great one of the foundational things, along with getting rid of primitive reflexes, what brain or cognitive style you lean towards, or you could be perfectly in the middle. That's ideal, or real close to it, because most people lean right or lean left. And an example of left would be big time ADHD, big time autism. You know, when you lean way left, their superpower is that focus, is that attention to detail, that drive. Even non-communicative, the things that we see when they can start communicating, the genius level skill sets, especially verbal functions, certain math skills. You see these people that have perfect pitch is a left brain voice verbal skill. Right brain people tend to be what we would call singer-songwriters, right? Stevie Wonder, for those of you who grew up when I grew up, and he's still famous today. Stevie Wonder, this is a blind guy that wrote music. Now think about the empathy and the feeling, the emotions when he puts words in his songs that describe how people look, describe how people feel. And he can't see any of that. So think about how strong that right brain ability of understanding and comprehension of words and phrases and feelings is compared to the left brain skill, superpower over here, verbal like nobody's business. You know the definition, you've got words, there's a real cool test called the FAS test. And typically they use the letters F, A, and S. And what you do is you have 1 minute to say out loud as many letters that start with the letter A, for example, or the letter S. You can't use nouns, cannot use nouns, and you cannot use curse words, and you cannot repeat a word in terms of fast, faster, fastest. You can't do that. They've got to be separate, individual, unique words. Okay, but think about how a left brain dominant person, they're going to blow right through that thing. They're going to pick up 12 words in less than a minute, so fast you can't even think straight. And that's a good score, 12. You want at least 9. 12 is better, and more is better. But the average adult with a good vocabulary is going to hit 12. So you've got these things that are advanced levels, but again, imagine, for example, imagine the example of the autistic child who cannot communicate, but he or she has all these words in his head or her head, but they don't have any right brain skills yet because this is so dominant that it actually suppresses the other side. So what happens is this is dominant, so they aren't even aware of. When I was at that seminar a couple of weeks ago with Dr. Malillo, he kept mentioning a patient he has right now that has learned how to type, and he's now communicating for the first time. He's 12 years old, and his parents couldn't believe he can type full sentences. But he doesn't, he literally typed, "I am starting to feel my tongue." Right brain, what we call interoception or enteroception, whichever you want to use, I or E. That's being aware of yourself, being aware of what's inside of you, being aware of your temperature, being aware of hunger, being aware of pain, being aware of muscular control, right? If you can't feel your tongue, if you can't feel your mouth, you can't talk. So that all of that stuff, think about it. We're putting sentences together, which is an executive function. But if you can't talk, I don't know that. And one of the most frustrating things this boy used to type about is people would talk about him like he didn't know what they were saying. And it was very frustrating. That's why some autistic kids get very aggressive. It's a level of frustration that they are not able to communicate or be understood the way they're thinking. So what we do, and what I want you to do, everyone here with high level functioning, is before we focus on what takes place up here and here, we should think about other stuff. You've got to make sure, for example, survival. A great survival skill is the sense of smell. If you don't smell well, you're not going to know whether food is good or bad. You're not going to know whether something horrible is over there. Bad smells avoid, good smells approach, right? It's really, that kind of thing is important. So smell training, we've talked about. We talked about taste training. If you can't taste it, how do you know whether that milk, I don't drink that kind of milk, but how would you know milk is good or bad if you can't taste it or you can't smell it? And they affect each other, don't they? So these basic things help with the decision-making on whether you're going to eat or drink something. So I really want to emphasize today that the previous lectures of light touch, firm touch, temperature, you can use warm and cold to train areas of your brain. You can use vision. For example, a really cool little test I like, something really, really simple, is using sound and touch. So first, you might have your partner test snapping a finger out in front of you, and you can see it. Snap, touch, snap, touch, snap, touch, snap, touch. Okay. Now what you do then is, but I know where both of them are. The idea is close your eyes, snap, touch, snap, touch, snap, touch, snap, touch, snap, touch. Now the partner starts moving it around, and you're using vision at first because you want to do recall and you want spatial awareness. Then you're doing without vision, and then you start moving it around so that you also use sound localization, because both of those are very important, aren't they? And there you're stimulating vision, you're stimulating sound, the parietal lobes up, and that's temporal and occipital. And then some vision travels through your temples and through your parietal lobes. The where is parietal lobe vision. The sound is, the what is it is temporal vision. Something comes flying at you. You got to determine where it is. Do I duck? And if it's soft and fluffy, I probably don't have to. That's the what is it, right? Is it coming in too fast to catch? Is it too firm to catch barehanded? That kind of thing, okay? So you literally can stimulate all of this other brain function that will help the executive decision making on should I catch it? Should I duck out of the way? What takes place? I really want to emphasize today, if I haven't said that enough, all of the other training that we do, soft touch, like I said, firm touch, that is hugely important. Temperature, taste, smell, sound, vision, all of those are important to help you lay the foundation. If you don't have any, I wouldn't skip to this if I was dealing with a lot of dysfunction or functional disconnection syndrome. We build from the bottom up, like I said, with primitive reflex and the other steps we used. But it's really important to stimulate all of your senses, get everything functioning 100%, and then worry about your executive function. But again, I really like those couple of games I showed you the other day. Really, really lots of fun. Those are really good executive function games. Stroop test, digit span test, and what else did I say? Card grab. Really, really a good time. And I would also recommend with digit span, you use numbers, you can use letters. It's harder, I think, to use words in order because part of getting it correct is visualizing, and it's hard to visualize that many letters and that many words in order. That tends to be, for me, is the most challenging. The numbers and the letters is easier, and then the words is the hardest. And again, with numbers, you really should get past 7. You want to get up close to 9. But those are all executive function games, and I like those, and the card grab that we talked about. But remember, one of the biggest actually executive function things that you can do is something we made a big deal about, and that's goal setting and achieving goals. You got to remember that almost 1,500 years ago, when the Quran was revealed, how do you say, the not to minimize or scientific it or whatever, but when you think about what's taking place, the Quran is, for me, it just fits everything. That's why everything I think about, everything I do, it kind of applies or comes from, or I can take it back to. The idea is, think about the Quran visually over and over and over again in the Quran. I mean, and I don't know exactly, somebody probably can, because it's really cool that people, this many words and this many times, and I think that's just neat, but I don't memorize that way. But the idea is, think about how many pictures, verbal pictures, are given to us in the Quran. How beautiful heaven is, how we've got rivers of honey flowing and rivers of milk and the green grass, and we're told that there's a tree in heaven that is so big, picture, right, that it takes 700 years for a rider on horseback to get from one end of its shade to the other. So, I mean, these are all pictures, aren't they? So again, where do we do that? And it's very clear pictures, very easy to understand, very descriptive pictures. And then we've got clear pictures of, like we talk about, the lying, sinning forelock, chapter 96, when it's described that they will be thrown into the hellfire, and there will be very stern-faced angels guarding that, and they don't disobey Allah. So, I mean, they're just not angel guards. That's not what they're described as. They're very stern, and they follow Allah's orders. So you picture what's taking place there. You've got these beautiful pictures, and that builds up the desire of want. And then you've got these scary pictures that build up that desire to avoid, right? I mean, that's definitely, I don't want stern angels keeping me in the hellfire. So the idea is, we have that. Then we have very logical stuff and step-by-step instructions, or if you do this, you will be rewarded with that. If you do this, you will be punished with that. This is what is a good Muslim. This is what is a bad person. This. So you've got very structured and linear stuff. It's really cool to me how, as Allah's creations, his final revelation is very clear on how it delivers the message. If you are super strong right brain and you really love descriptions and maybe, and the right brain is very much avoidance. That's what keeps you alive. That's the awareness side. I gave the example months ago of a hunting party. And if you're hunting with someone, if you're a right brain person, you want a left brain person to hunt with. If you're a left brain person, you really, really want a right brain person to hunt with. Because imagine you're running across the savannah. I lived in South Africa for a while, and just outside where I was living, gigantic, not tall grass savanna because a big human presence, but it's just a beautiful area. A little bit dry, so it was kind of savanna, but not tall flowing grass savanna. And imagine you're out there and you're hunting. And you've got your spears, your bows and arrows. You don't have all these scopes and you're looking miles away. Imagine you're truly hunting, or you're hunting in the woods and the trees are right here. So, but I like the African savanna because you've got this visual. So you're looking out through this tall grass and you see the grass move. And of course, both the right brain is very, very aware and it's scanning around. The right brain hunter is even looking back a little bit once in a while. And you see the grass move. Both the left brain and the right brain are going to focus on that grass movement, aren't they? The difference is the right brain is going to stay on that grass a little bit longer because that is actually avoiding danger. When I walk into a room, I want to make sure everyone in the room, I want to gear emotions. I want to make sure it's safe for me to enter, right? If it's not safe, I'm out of there. If this is a pride of lions, I'm out of there. The left brain person, on the other hand, think about this. The left brain person looks very goal oriented. I'm cool with that, right? Very goal oriented, but then it doesn't see the grass move again. The left brain, its goal, along with the right brain person, the goal is to find food to survive, but also to be the hunter, not the hunted. Left brain. Okay, we're not being hunted. Now it's back to the goal of hunting. Now, in all the National Geographics and all these science shows, lions, boop, and stop. Boop, and stop, right? So the grass moves, the lion stops, the lion waits a little bit. The right brain hunter is doing this. Then the grass moves again. The right brain hunter nudges the left brain hunter and says, it's over there. So that's how we work inside with right brain and left brain. Okay. So again, when we talk about sensations, we want to remember that this is kind of like I said, with the Stevie Wonder example, it's very empathetic. It's going to be very comprehensive, very understanding. And those are good skills because you want to be understanding and you want to use then your left brain verbal set to fit into the group. But if you don't get it, if you don't emphasize that right brain, not only do you get eaten, but you say stuff you shouldn't say in today's society. How many people do we know that pop off with all this rude stuff? This reelected white guy and all of his compatriots up there, even the females up there. I mean, this isn't just a male thing. All these people he brought up out of Florida and stuff. I mean, that is so left brain dominant. And what happens when a society moves over to left brain? You've got to understand, why did the left brain hunter go back to trying to get the food right away? Left brain, especially when it leans as far out as some of our political examples right now, when that left brain leans way out, all they like to do is accumulate. And you'll see all those other left brain people up there at the re-election celebrations and stuff, all of them. Everybody describes them as no emotions. They focus on what they're doing and oh, they're so great at this, that, and the other thing. They have no right brain skill set at all. It's like one of my mentors, actually, one of his favorite jokes was, on the left, there's nothing right, and on the right, there's nothing left. And that's true when it goes that excessive. And that's what we're seeing with this left brain move is these knuckleheads don't have any empathy. They don't have anything. They don't have a big picture. They are so goal centered. It's just scary. And what happens is, again, if you don't have that balance, and you can see by the one guy, the electric car guy, he literally, and the reelected white guy, these guys at that celebration when the music was playing, who can't, even I'll probably be able to pull off a little rhythm to 1970s disco music. There was a video out there showing those two goofballs. I mean, no rhythm whatsoever. Rhythm and athletic coordination, big muscle control is a right brain skill set. These guys are so left brain, they can't hardly walk without stumbling, right? And that's a huge issue. And it's clearly, that's where another point for people raising kids, you don't want your child skipping crawling. We can't skip crawling. You shouldn't be proud of the fact that they went from rolling over to standing up and walking. Part of crawling is that military crawl, and they drag their legs. Then they start crawling and pushing with the legs. And then you'll start to see, right, as they start pushing with their legs, they'll scoot and they'll alternate with their arms. Then eventually they coordinate their legs and they get the opposite sides, the cross crawling. Then they get up on their hands and knees. Now they actually do cross crawl. That's hugely important because then you've worked on the coordination of the right and left hemisphere, working opposite sides of the body at the same time. And then you can build on walking and running smoothly. If the baby misses crawling, they have a huge issue. If they go right to walking, huge issue. Even in adults, there's some great research that shows adults can improve their math scores by crawling 20 minutes a day. And it'll only improve so much, but it's really cool on some of the math tests that you can literally improve your skill set by crawling 20 minutes a day. And there's cool tests out there. You can Google them up if you want to. But the idea is, again, with these decision makings from hunting, from working in the community, from being successful, the last part of development, with everything I've said tonight, is executive function development. And then you really, really, really want to make sure that your right and left hemispheres are working together. Because like I said, it'd be really cool to have billions and billions, $200 billion, be the richest guy in the world. But what does that mean when we all die? Because for us, for the believers, we know there's going to be a judgment day. We know we are going to be questioned about all these blessings that we were given that we didn't share. I have a relative that was really, he'd accumulated and died at $20 million and didn't like sharing any of it. And he still died. Can't take it. It's true. You cannot take it with you. And when it hits that close to home, it really means something. And I've got the brother, many of you know that I'm visiting a close friend of mine down in South Florida every weekend, who didn't try to accumulate anything, giving all the time. Oh my gosh, mashallah. And imagine when he's judged. Who did better in life? The guy that accumulated everything and died with it? Or the brother that followed the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And what did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say as he was dying? If there are coins here, give them away. If there's stuff here, give it away. If I'm in debt, give it away. You can't take it with you, and you don't want to keep things and be judged on them. And that's why it's so important. We have to do work from the foundation. And as the sister asked, the executive function, there are things we can do for executive function, but one of the best things, or some of the best things we can do, is listen to the previous lectures where we're talking about stimulating taste and smell and the sensations, where we talk about the other areas, the other lobes in the brain, because all of that builds And then if all of that's functioning, balanced, and correctly, now you gather all the information and you make your executive function decisions. And if you're using both sides and everything's working correctly, you make good decisions. And believe it or not, I'm going to close in a few minutes before we take questions. Believe it or not, I'm going to take us right back to GPA everything. Because one of the biggest things about executive functioning is planning and achieving goals. So if you want to improve your executive function, what do you think you should do? You should tie up your camel and rely on the collar of Allah. You're going to make your plan. You're going to get there. You're going to tie up the camel. And then you're going to go do what you do, right? Relying on the collar of Allah to decide whether you should have that blessing or not. With GPA, again, and when you think about the Quran, and I picture making it into heaven, picture being surrounded by your family and friends, picture you are blessed with the highest levels and you're around all the previous prophets, all of their companions. You're around the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba, whose histories we have, literal histories memorized and handed down, written at the time it happened. And the Quran, the Prophet Dawood, with the most beautiful voice, reciting Quran and calling the Iqamah for prayer. And I mean, imagine, picture that stuff, right? That's your goal. And the purpose is, in my case, as a father, the purpose of trying to achieve that goal, number one, protect you and your family from a fire whose fuel is mankind and womankind, mankind and stones. So you've got to be a good role model so that you can role model for the rest of the kids. I mentioned my daughter sending me the Quranic verse, 2 lectures ago, I believe it was. Well, she heard about a real good book about motivation and self-image and goal achieving. And she's heard a lot of people talk about it, a lot of good things about it. So she ordered it and sent it to me. I got it the day before yesterday. I'm finishing up the first chapter. I read the introduction, had some really cool stuff in it. And of course, with me, I relate it right back to, in this case, I relate it right back to Malillo and right and left hemispheres and goal setting. And there's a phrase in there that human beings are goal-seeking creatures. We are goal-seeking creatures. And then our self-image plays a big part on whether we pursue higher level goals or whether we underachieve and fail based on how we view ourselves. Well, the idea is, as Malillo taught us, that if you set your goals, you have a big enough purpose, like getting into heaven, and then you take your action steps. That's the GPA. And of course, set a time frame. That GPA is everything. Because even if you have a horrible self-image or you have a great self-image, all these people, they always achieve their goals. I'm fine with that. The idea is, even if you have a horrible, horrible self-image, you can still set an easy goal. Set a goal. Why do you want to achieve it? Pretend it's weight loss and you're so self-conscious, so right-brained, your body image is everything. That may be motivating enough for you. I still exercise, 1, because I like to. Number 2, because my mother exercises with me, and if I don't, she won't. At least that's what she says. My kids exercise. My one child, my daughters, I was together with them the other day, and not to leave my sons out, I was together with them for the past couple of days. The idea is that the one daughter said, man, I have no excuse not to exercise. Both my parents, and my ex-wife was there, both my parents exercise. Even my 88-year-old grandmother exercises with my dad. So again, protect you and your family, right? So these are, for me, these are the greater purposes. So imagine in Jannah, the goal is to get to Jannah. I'm going to try to role model that behavior for my kids and for myself, because I definitely don't want to be in the hellfire. And then the actions I'm going to take are thoroughly covered in the Quran. And of course, the Hadith. I'm a big fan of all of the Hadith. I've read 2 different books of tafsir, Life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's there. It was written at the time. There's no interpretation. It's not hundreds of years later or 90 years later or whatever the case is. Literally, the Quran was written as it was revealed and then brought together. And everybody, if you know the history, Hafiz or memorizers of the Quran had been killed in a battle, so they decided to accumulate, make sure it's all structured. The angel Jibril, for those of you who don't know, the angel Jibril came down and laid it out in the order Allah wanted it in the Quran, laid it out and went over it with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's what we have today. Now you can disagree with that. I'm fine with that, but Allah will judge that, right? So the idea is for us, we've got the goal of heaven or whatever goal you have, a big, gigantic purpose. And then the action steps you have to take. Like I said, even with a poor self-image, what can I do right now? What can I do tomorrow to achieve that goal? Pretend it's again, an easy thing for me to think about is weight loss. And I love the number 50. Because I used to do a lot of talks for the office about weight loss and exercise. And I always throw the question out there, how many people would like to lose 50 pounds? Because apparently that's a gigantic and average weight for a lower average of being overweight is 50 pounds. So, darn near everybody in the audience, it's a weight loss dinner. They raise their hands, I want to lose 50 pounds. How many people have tried to lose 50 pounds? How many people have succeeded? Boop. Very few, right? They wouldn't be at a weight loss dinner if they had done it. So the idea is, how many people really think they can do it? A few hands go up, but people are real hesitant. Now that's where goal, purpose, and action step and time frame come in. The next question for weight loss is, suppose you want to lose 50 pounds. And then I say, you say, no, I can't do it. And I engage with the audience, and it's really hard. And I know it's hard. But the idea is, suppose I said, how about losing 1 pound a week? What would be the action step for 1 pound? Don't drink any sugary drinks for a week. How many people can stop drinking sugary drinks for a week? The idea is, don't eat that muffin for breakfast. I eat a very high protein breakfast. Number 1, protein's hard to break down. Number 2, I didn't eat at night, so I'm starving. I want the amino acids because I'm more focused on strengthening. As we age, we're more likely to lose muscle weight than we are fat weight, right? So the idea is the proteins help with that. The idea of executive function now, right? We're talking about achieving and goal setting, and then we're talking about inhibiting bad choices and initiating good choices. Exercising first thing in the morning, do 5 push-ups, do 10 crunches, do 10 planks, hold the plank for 10 seconds, hold the plank for, even on your forearms, hold the plank for 15 seconds, hold the plank for 20 seconds. Now you're starting to get rid of the back pain and firm up posture muscles. So 1 pound a week is get rid of some sugary drinks and get rid of the muffins. Move over to protein, fruits, and vegetables. And yes, proteins have sugars, but you got a lot of fiber in there too. And again, the example of apples. How many apples in a bag can you eat? 1, maybe 2 if you had to. How many bags of potato chips can you eat? 1 or 2 probably, if you wanted to. And then you got to drink a sugary drink after that because you're so darn thirsty. So the idea is the Quran is clear. It tells us the goal. It gives us all these steps on how to achieve it, the purpose, because we want to. And it gives us the opposite, where we will be if we don't try to achieve it. And what's the purpose? Protect you and your family from a fire whose fuel is mankind and stones. What better purpose, bigger purpose than that? And then the action steps. Make your shahada. Pray 5 times a day. Give charity. Fast. And Hajj if you can. And Umrah. All that stuff. And then there's a lot of little things we can do. We can pray more. We can pray sunnah. We can give charity, more charity. then pay zakat, different from charity, sadaqah. Make umrah, not just hajj, and the kindness, smiling to your brothers and sisters is considered charity, right? All of this is in there. And think about how important the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. We're ordered to pray 5 times a day, right? But there's nowhere in the Quran that tells us how to pray, the steps we're supposed to take. So you have to read the Sunnah and learn the Sunnah. And we have lots of books. My daughter and I right now are going through Bukhari and Muslim. We've got lots of books on how to do it right from the wives of the Prophet, from the companions of the Prophet that actually saw and heard and were given explanations of how to do this, how to do that, why. It's the book, the educational book, the guide, and books of what the teacher taught us, if I can simplify it without sinning. The idea is we have the Quran, we have the Sunnah, we have a goal, we have a purpose, we have an action plan, and of course, in terms of being Muslims, the time frame is every minute of every day for the rest of our lives, isn't it? So seriously, referencing right back and closing it all together with executive function. There's so many other things that you have to strengthen before you get there. But there's nothing better for executive function, and the games are cool. There's nothing better than goal, purpose, action plan, and of course, time frame. You GPA everything. Literally during the day, like I said, if I have something come up during the day that has to get done, I GPA that thing. How am I fitting it in? Am I making that phone call to the credentialing agency, or I have a peer-to-peer? I have to talk to another doctor to get something approved, like an MRI or something for a patient. I know I'll fit that in at this time. I usually don't make any phone calls before 9:30 because I want everybody else in other offices to get everything off their desks so they can pay attention to what I'm saying or asking or what we're doing. So I GPA everything. Every day I GPA something new. Every day. And then I glance at the GPAs that I have set, like the computer program, the companion manual, a book series that a friend of mine and I are working on, a business project. I mean, everything's GPA. And then on a daily basis, you fit your daily GPAs in there. Does that make sense? And that will strengthen so much of your executive function. Literally tonight, like with Sister Sabrina, taking the book off the shelf and doing it, or setting it off the shelf so that when she wakes up early in the morning, it's the last thing she did before she went to bed at night. It's the last thing she thought about, and it's the first thing she's going to do when she wakes up. I talk about typing in the morning. My alarm clock is set. I do my thing. I pray. Then I come over here and I start typing because that's important, and that's a GPA for tomorrow. Today's Thursday. You all know what I'm going to say next. I'm going to listen to the Quran before I go to bed at night, because we should listen to Surah Al-Kahf every Jummah, shouldn't we? So, and I really, really like listening to it in Arabic. And there are times when I read it in English so that I don't forget what I'm listening to. But I like listening to my Quran before I go to sleep. And as I mentioned it the last couple of weeks, what did I start doing? I started listening to the Quran at night from start to finish. I just let it play. And then I literally wake up and I turn it off and I go back to sleep. I love listening to the Quran and thinking that in the grave, the Quran will come to our defense. On the day of judgment, the Quran will come to our defense and talk about how we demonstrated our love for the Quran. So that's important to me. Inshallah, are there any questions from last week in the games I discussed, or anything from today?